Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. And so where we're going to be picking up today is on page 4, very bottom paragraph. It's right where it kicks off. We went to live with my wife's parents. Yikes. Oh, yikes. I mean, immediately, uh-oh. And just to pick up and describe where we're picking up, what we've been seeing is the accretion that we have commenced. Let me be clear. We have commenced the accretion of consequences that have been building up as the result of the physical allergy. So that's what we want to keep an eye on. Let's see the physical allergy. Now, last week we wrapped up with Bill Wilson. The stock market crashes, but he goes to Canada. And we know there's no alcoholics in Canada. That'll go great. And then he got fired. Now, the reason he got fired was because of his drinking. So that was the first real consequence that we're beginning to see as the result of the inability to control the amount once he starts to drink. And so we're going to kick it off with a second consequence. Again, we went to live with my wife's parents. Oh boy, listen, at any time in history, nobody wants to live with the in-laws. If you're ending up in the in-laws, it's like, oh, you have not arrived. This is not good. And I will throw out just a little bit. This is a man in the 1930s where there maybe was certain specific gender roles. And he's not showing up how he promised to show up. He's not showing up to life how he wanted to show up to life. And if you're wondering, where did the in-laws live? Well, it was 182 Clinton Street in Brooklyn, New York. And you can go there today and visit. And here's an interesting thing that Bill Wilson and Lois lived there until 1938 or 1939 when they lost the house. Now, if you're following sort of the timeline of things, they lost the house in sobriety. And they became homeless in sobriety. I point that out because sometimes we think the benchmark of success is financial success or career success. But what we have here in Alcoholics Anonymous is something deeper than what we have in the bank account, but what we have within our soul. Like that's what we get to experience. And that this is a way of life that works when nothing else is working, when life is hard, when life is difficult. And I share that with you today because if you are somebody that is experiencing that, financial struggles, emotional struggles, life struggles, it's happening to you. It's lifing and it's overwhelming and it's too much. What I want you to know is that was Bill's experience. That was the experience of the co-founders. And this is a way of life that works in rough going. But right now we're in the mix of his alcoholism and we're again watching the accretion of consequences. So it says, I found a job. Now, this job, he was working as an investigator, and he was doing it for a gentleman by the name of Joe Hirshhorn. And he was making $100 a week, so about $400 a month, which was good pay in those days. That was a good income. This was not I had arrived money, but this was a good income. And they desperately needed that income because at this time, they were $60,000 in debt. And so they desperately needed that money. So he found a job, and then let's see what happens, and then lost it as the result of a brawl with the taxi driver. And I am just going to throw out that is a surefire sign of the physical allergy. Because do you know who is brawling with taxi cab drivers? Only people who do not have the ability to control the amount they drink once they start. And there have been times I've been working with a sponsee and I've been talking about that. There was a little light bulb that clicked off and I'm like, uh-oh, we got an amends to make, don't we? Only an alcoholic's going to be brawling with a taxi cab driver. And one of the things is when he lost his job, Joe Hirshhorn really did not want to fire him. He really did not want to let him go. But the severity of his actions necessitated his termination. And that's kind of the thing is, man, people fall in love with people like us. Alcoholics, we are delightful, except, of course, when we're getting involved in brawls with taxi cab drivers. And so we're going to read about what happened. We're going to read about it in about a page. But Joe gave Bill Wilson a severance check for about $2,500, $2,500, because he really didn't want to let Bill Wilson go. And we're going to see how that plays in. So it says, mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years, so from 1930 to 1935, or hardly draw a sober breath. And again, that inability to control that, what we're talking about is the physical allergy. Now, he is going to have periods of sobriety within these 5 years, 1930 to 1935. He is not a 24/7, 365 daily drinker, because if you're like me, I'm looking for the ways I'm not like Bill. I didn't get in a brawl with a taxi cab driver. It was an Uber. Like we're looking for all the ways that we're different. But what he's talking about is in this period, he did have periods of sobriety that we're going to look at, that we're going to talk about, that we're going to break down. But can I relate to that idea that once I start to drink, I cannot control the amount that I take, that allergy of the body? It goes on to say, my wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. So Lois was taking a bunch of odd jobs. One of the places she worked was at Macy's department store. And what she would do is she would design, the displays at the end of the aisles. And she was making $19 a week to support Bill, to support the family, and to try to pay down that $60,000 debt. And again, Bill Wilson probably feels that shame that I think so many of us know. That feeling that I'm not living up to my potential. Potential's not really a thing. It's intangible. But I feel like a loser. I feel like a piece of garbage. I feel like a failure. I feel like I'm not showing up to life how I'm supposed to show up to life. Can we relate to that? He goes on to say, when you start talking on Zoom for a while, it tells you, we'd like you to confirm your speaking language. I got Persian. That's a first. Normally it'll give me English or Spanish, but Persian, oh, delightful. I'm not trying. I can barely do English at the best of times. Alrighty, top of page 5. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. So Bill Wilson is showing up at these places on Wall Street trying to get his foot in the door, and he's drunk or hungover, and they just don't want him. Can I relate to that feeling? That feeling of being an unwelcome hanger-on. Again, another sign, a symptom of the consequences of the physical allergy. We're going to notice this progression. It goes on to say, liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. So at this point in time, he is not drinking because he wants to. He drinks because he needs to. Can I relate to that? Can I relate to that progression? I'm no longer drinking because I want to. I'm drinking because I need to. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day and often 3, got to be routine. Now, what we're talking about is Rob's got it. Sometimes I feel like Rob and I are racing and Rob won. And no, we're not racing. We're working together. It's a team. Rob's the best. So when we talk about bathtub gin, we're talking about home brewed alcohol. Because we're in the period of prohibition where the sale of alcohol is illegal. And this is definitely not regulated alcohol. What's the percentage? It's a good one. And actually, I'll tell you this story. I was visiting family. I was visiting my brother's ex-wife and her mom, and they had some friends over, and they were drinking, and I'm sober, and I'm hanging out. And then somebody had made this bottle of or a jar. It was a mason jar of peach moonshine. So it had these peaches at the bottom, and it was like this home brewed like moonshine, and they were drinking it. And then at the end of the night. And by the way, I will tell you that they were like, we are so drunk. And I'm like, okay, you enunciated every word of that sentence. None of you has wobbled. You're walking a straight line. I think you could probably pass a field sobriety test. God bless you. You guys are not drinking how I was drinking. But then they do this thing, and it is wild. So there's these peaches, and the peaches are at the very bottom of the mason jar, and they're passing it around. Who wants it? Oh, no, I don't want it. Would you like it? No, I don't want. No, you have it. No, you have it. Man, that is not the sort of argument about the peaches that I would be having. And mine, give it more for me, you know? So I just want to share that example to sort of illuminate that I drink a little bit differently than non-alcoholics. And if you can relate to, listen, I'd be drinking that peaches, or I'd be, chomping on those peaches. I got to get, I need more. The more that I drink, man, that is us. It goes on to say sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s. So Bill Wilson would scrape together a few $100s. Now let's see. What do we think Bill Wilson is going to do with this money? Do we think he's going to invest it on Wall Street? Do we think he's going to use it to put a down payment on an apartment so they can move out of the in-laws place? Because listen, if you've ever had to live with an in-law, you know there's a sense of urgency on that one. Do you think he's trying to help Lois out with the family finances? What does he do with this few $100s? I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. So he's paying down the debt that allows him to continue to drink. Can I relate to that sort of financial prioritization? What comes first is alcohol and paying down the things that allow me to continue to drink. He goes on to say, this went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. And so we are seeing some physical symptoms and signs of withdrawal. So he's beginning to have DTs, delirium tremens. This is not good. Now again, let's enter into this part of the paragraph as if we were a Lois, maybe we were a sponsor, maybe we were a concerned friend. Let's look at what's happening to Bill from the outside looking in. And it said, so this is him in the morning. A tumbler full of gin followed by half a dozen bottles of beer. That is 6. So we'd need a tumbler of gin and a 6-pack. A 6-pack would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. That's what he needs before he puts any food in his body first thing in the morning. Now we're all looking at Bill and we are all like, uh-oh, right? We can tell Bill Wilson is in trouble. He is in trouble. This is serious. He's got some pretty serious symptoms. And this is Bill Wilson's response. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. Now, can we relate to that? The people in our life are like, hey, I am really worried about you. This is serious. And have we had some of those physical symptoms? Have we had the early signs of DTs? Or have we had physical consequences, injuries, or that sort of things as the result of the allergy of the body? And still been like, oh no, I got this, I got it, I'm good, I got this. And it goes on to say, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So he was not 24/7, 365. He would put it down for a bit and return, and put it down for a bit and return. And things are not going so well, but gradually things got worse. Uh-oh. And I will point out, if I can relate to Bill Wilson on page 2, then Bill Wilson on page 5, Bill Wilson on page 8 is inevitable. You see, there is only one direction that alcoholism will take me, and that is down. It is a sharp decline. So gradually things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Now, in the chronology of Bill Wilson's sort of experience, this would have happened a little bit earlier. But when it talks about Bill Wilson's wife becoming ill, it reminds me of this part of the book in Lois Remembers. So this happened. This is referencing what happened in 1931, give or take. 31, and we're going back to the 1920s, but I want to share with you this, and of course, if we're coming to this study, we know we have our completely random, handy-dandy copy of Lois Remembers. Don't you worry if you do not have a copy of Lois Remembers on hand. I'm gonna do all the reading, don't you worry. So it says, and if you do have a copy, it's on page 34, bottom paragraph, and if you don't worry about it. So In May, and this is Lois from her experience, in May 1923, the improbable happened. A third ectopic, and that's a pregnancy where the egg is fertilized outside of the uterus. And it is painful and it can be fatal. It's quite serious. I was tutoring a young girl in Latin when I felt the first symptoms. After another operation, I made a quick recovery. By then, both tubes and the complete cystic ovary had been removed. A small portion of the other ovary was kept so that I might retain my feminine characteristics, it was said. Bill was often too drunk for days at a time to come see me at the hospital. Can I relate to my alcoholism taking me? And I'm not showing up when I need to show up. I'm not showing up when I want to show up. We had both deeply desired a family. But after my second ectopic, Bill and I knew positively that we could never have children. My tubes had apparently been closed since birth. Bill, even when drunk, took this overwhelming disappointment with grace and kindness to me. But his drinking had been increasing steadily. It seemed that after all hope of having children had died, his bouts with alcohol had become ever more frequent. I had done nothing to prevent our having children, yet somehow I could not help feeling guilty. So how could I blame him for the increase in his drinking? And that is just a subtle effect on the power that this illness has. Bill Wilson's drinking had nothing to do with Lois. It had nothing to do with them not having children. It had everything to do with the progression of the fatality, the progression of the illness leading towards its inevitable fatality. It had nothing to do with that. But how could she not blame herself? And so we continue on drinking because we are under the lash of an illness over which we could not possibly have any power. And our loved ones sit and watch us to their horror, to their consternation. And how could they not blame themselves? And I've done some of my own, clearly I've done a lot of work, and if that's not clear, I promise you I was way worse. You know, there's a thing that happens when we go through grief, where we find ourselves feeling guilty. And that feeling of guilt is often a desire to control the uncontrollable. And that's where that was probably coming from for her, that feeling of guilt. Because she wanted to feel like she could control that which was uncontrollable. She can't control what was happening with her reproductive organs. She could not control what was happening with Bill Wilson's alcoholism. But it's a human thing to take that on. So this kind of thinking made me try harder to understand him and to be tolerant when he was drunk. But there were many times when I lost my temper. He never hit me, but I hit him. I remember with shame one time towards the end of his drinking when I was so angry as he lay drunk on the bed that I beat his chest with both fists as hard as I could. Several years after, we learned we could never have children of our own. And when we felt financially able, we applied to the Spence Chapin Child Adoption Agency for a baby. As time went on, we heard nothing. We inquired several times, and the agency always replied that the suitable child had not yet been found. But Bill was always sure the real reason was his drinking. Only a short time ago, in 1974, I learned this was so. We had given to the Spence Chapin the names of a few of our friends as references. One of my best and oldest friends responded to the agency by saying she considered we would not make reliable parents because Bill drank to excess. And I want to point something out. Bill Wilson, he didn't know, but he knew. He knew it was because of his drinking. And his drinking is not just crushing his hopes and dreams, it's crushing the hopes and dreams that he and Lois had together. I mean, that is the power of this illness. And can I relate to losing things like that? Can I relate to crossing those lines that I said I would never cross? You know, it's the great eraser that is my alcoholism. It erases, it subtracts, it deteriorates, it burns to the ground and levels everything that is worthwhile in my life and everything that I hoped my life could be. the next paragraph on page 5, it says, then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. Now, prodigious is the bender to end all benders. Like, oh, he burnt it to the ground. Now, I am going to go back to Lois Remembers, because this ties in with Joe Hirshhorn. And that, yeah. Rob's got it in the chat. So I just to paint the picture of what happened. Because again, we're seeing that accretion of consequences building up. And we're going to see how, and this, if we look in Lois Remembers, we're going to see the first instance of the power of the mental obsession. Now, we're going to see it in page 5 in a paragraph or two. But we're going to see the mental obsession if we pop over to Lois Remembers. So if you have your handy dandy copy of Lois Remembers, it's complete. Yeah, some of you do. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. Pop over to page 82. And it's right near the bottom of the page where it says Macy's furniture floor. So this is Lois. She's working at Macy's. At Macy's furniture floor was at that time a vast open expanse of running the long block from 6th to 7th Avenue so that anyone, especially one as tall as Bill, could be seen at a great distance. On our 14th wedding anniversary in January 1932, I saw a tall figure weaving up the long aisle. He held a parcel in one hand and a bouquet of flowers in the other, waiting patiently while I finished with a customer. He then ceremoniously presented his gifts to the interest of everyone around. The tissue-wrapped parcel contained a wristwatch and a check for $2,500, which he had earned by doing investing for Joe Hirshhorn. So, Bill Wilson, what a romantic. Who wouldn't? By the way, some of us, like Kathy, she's already like, I know where this story is going. I've not picked up Lois Remembers, but I can tell you where this is going. Bill, what a husband. Let's see how this goes. Our dinner celebration at a swanky restaurant was, of course, preceded by cocktails, which added to what he had already swallowed, made Bill uninterested in food. So I'm just gonna, if you're unsure what we're talking about, bottom of 82 on Lois Remembers. I saw Martina grabbing her Lois Remembers, so I wanted to make sure I gave you the page. So Bill Wilson. They're having their beautiful, romantic, wonderful anniversary dinner. Bill Wilson's got to pregame that. He's got to have drinks before drinks. And then he shows up to the dinner and he's drinking cocktails. And for some reason, he's not wanting like a steak and lobster or anything like that. He's just wanting to drink. Does that sound familiar? So... after a few sips of soup, God bless. So after a few sips of soup, I had to take him home. The next day, he asked me to give back the check. What? Bill, that's not cool. Kathy knew this was coming. I was shocked and disappointed, but believed him when he said he needed it for an exciting new investment company that was being formed with him as a manager. And so this is we're tying in with the promising business opportunity. He had always been able to sell himself and his ideas. So even as late as 1932, in the downward plunge of his drinking career, he was able to pull himself together and impress a coterie of wealthy friends with his knowledge and ability. These men included the founders of the new company, Arthur Wheeler and Frank Winans, to whom my brother-in-law, Hobo Switzel, had introduced Bill. Now, this is not anything to do with anything, but it's interesting that his nickname is Hobo, because that's kind of how we do nicknames in AA. You know, we're the type of people we'll show up and we're like, "Where's Dumpster Joe?" Or or I think it's Dumpster Page. But neither here nor there. So they had introduced Bill. But there was a proviso. So there was a stipulation in the contract They had heard about Bill's drinking, and the contract stated that if he drank during the life of the company, he would be automatically out. So at this promising business opportunity, he's invested $2,500, which was a lot of money back in those days. He had invested that money, and he had agreed to the proviso. So what we have seen in Lois Remembers is his first swearing off. And if you remember from this cycle of alcoholism, that's it. I'm not going to drink again. And what we're going to see is the power of the obsession of the mind. That for an alcoholic, swearing off has no effect. For an alcoholic, a super important proviso stipulation sort of thing has absolutely no effect. So let's see what happens. This was an opportunity for Bill to get back into Wall Street. For a time, all went well. Then, as one opportunity seemed to attract another, the Pathé Company asked Bill to go to Bound Brook, New Jersey. Nothing ever bad happens in New Jersey. There's no alcoholics in New Jersey, right, Suzanne? With a group of engineers to invest in a new photographic process. Ooh, how exciting. Bill was glad to have this extra chance to retrieve his good reputation, and it didn't interfere with his other projects. So man, things are on the upswing, guys. It's going well. It's on the upswing. In the evenings at Bound Brook, the men sat around playing cards and drinking. As Bill was on the wagon and never liked cards, he became more and more bored. And she says, when we were first married, I tried to teach him bridge, but he didn't seem to be able to distinguish the jack from the king. As the evening wore on, he became curious. What was the big jug that was going around? Upon hearing it was Jersey Lightning. It's also known as Applejack. So this is the Applejack story or the Jersey Lightning story. So it's this bottle that goes around. Upon hearing it was Jersey Lightning, he thought, I've never had any. Wouldn't it be awful if I should go to my grave without ever having tasted Jersey Lightning? And so what was happening is the bottle goes around one time. And he says, no, that's it. I'm not going to drink. And then the bottle goes around and he says, no, I'm not going to drink. And it goes around, well, I've never had Jersey Lightning. And this is the Sisyphean nature of the obsession of the mind. You see, we will roll that boulder. I'm not going to drink. I don't want to drink. I want to stay sober. I need to stay sober. I don't want to do it up the hill. But the obsession of the mind will always win. It might not happen right away, but it will always win. And I will drink again. It's like standing in the ocean. And me trying to use self-will against the mental obsession is like trying to stop the waves from coming. And I might be able to stay standing after a couple of waves. But there's going to be an attrition that happens. And eventually I am going to drink again. And that is what we really need to see here. The obsession of the mind. And it goes on to say, so that was it. Whenever the jug circled, he helped himself again and again. The allergy begins to set off. It says, with the inevitable result. But this time, the result was far-reaching. He had broken his contract. This was a very serious thing to Bill. His New England conscience considered a contract a sacred thing, and he had broken it. The obsession of the mind, it led him to cross a line in the sand that he said that he would never cross. These are morals and values. Can I relate to this illness taking from me, allowing me to cross these things that I said I would never do? His friends, Arthur and Frank, soon learned of his drinking, and they called to tell him the agreement was ended. Virtually, too, was Bill's career on Wall Street. But more important still was the end of his confidence that he could overcome his drinking problem. He begins to have a glimpse of the seriousness of this illness. His interest in stopping drinking for his own sake had been aroused, but he hadn't been able to do it. So he knew he wanted to stay sober, and he wanted to do it for him for this business contract, and he was not able to. So going back to page 5, right after the prodigious bander, that chance vanished, he's done on Wall Street, and he says again and sees again the seriousness of this thing. He knows he can never drink again. It says, I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw that I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. So he is able to see the power of the allergy of the body. He sees he cannot drink. But as we talk about again and again and again, step 1 is not, I can never ever drink again. Because Bill Wilson sees he can never ever drink again. Step 1 is I can never ever drink again, and I will drink again. Spoilers, that's what's going to happen to Bill. So it says, I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. And if you're writing in your book, you can make a note that this is the first time in Bill's story we see him swearing off. That's it. I'm never, ever going to drink again. I had written lots of sweet promises. Now, one of the things when it talks about that sweet promises, I often talk about there were times in his drinking career where he would write pledges on the family Bible, which, you know, like back in the day, you'd put your hand on on the Bible before court, like it was a sign of deep and powerful honesty that I am not going to do this. And there were multiple pledges that he had written, and I'm pretty sure Rob just put a picture of that in the chat, and if he didn't, he's about to. I see him typing away, he's doing stuff. Woo! So I woke up, this had to be stopped. I saw that I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever, he's done. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. And so he is swearing off. He knows he can never drink. He has the humiliating experience of what happened at the Applejack, the Whiskey Lightning story. And it says, shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. And if you're writing in your book, you can make a note of the obsession of the mind. That is what clicked in for him. He was out there, I don't want to drink, I don't want to drink, I don't want to drink. And somebody puts a glass of beer in front of him or a drink in front of him. And without a second thought, he takes it. That is the obsession of the mind. And that is the power of the obsession of the mind. He couldn't play the tape. He couldn't phone a friend. He couldn't think of the consequences. He couldn't try to do a pro-cons list. He couldn't think of a stop sign and go, no drinking. It took him. That is the power of what we're up against. And that's what I mean when I talk about step 1 is that I will drink again. That there was nothing in that moment that he could do to stop himself from taking that drink. And he describes himself as, was I crazy? You know, because it seems insane. Why would we go back to the thing that is clearly ruining our lives? And he says, I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. He cannot differentiate what is true from what is false. What is true is once he starts to drink, he cannot control the amount that he takes. And what is false is, I've never had Apple Jacks. Oh, a drink won't hurt me. It'll be okay. He cannot see the true from the false. Again, the obsession of the mind. It goes on to say, renewing my resolve, I tried again. So this is him. You can make a note. He is swearing off again. So we're seeing him go through this cycle again and again and again. He's renewing my resolve. I tried again. He is not going to drink again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. That's cockiness. He's like, I got this. Woo! I'm saying no to drinking. Woo! I got it. I got it this time. I got it. And he says, I can laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. I got this thing. I'm feeling better, eating better. Oh yeah, doing some gym stuff. Like, I got this. There is no way I'm going to drink again. One day, I walked into a cafe to telephone. And right at that period where it says phone and the space right before it says in no time, what I want you to do is write a little arrow and write the mental obsession. Because he walks into a cafe to telephone. They didn't even have, pagers back then, the little beepers. They didn't have, not every house even had a phone. Maybe in the 30s, probably around then. But like if you needed to make a phone call, go into a cafe to use a telephone, that's not a crazy thing. But he enters and he gets a thought. Now, he doesn't tell us he got the thought. Before I take a drink, there is always a thought. And that thought tells me I can drink. That this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. One drink won't hurt. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk. Good and drunk then, and I did. And right there, when it talks about the whiskey rising to his head, and he's like, how did this happen? Well, in for a penny, in for a pound. I might as well get drunk. That is what the allergy of the body looks like. It looks like starting to drink and, just one more. Yeah, just one more, F it. I've already messed this thing up. I'm going to burn it to the ground. And so we're going to see, we're going through this cycle. This is the remorse and regret the morning after. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. So when we talk about that courage to do battle, that's when you come to consciousness in the morning and you don't feel like you can face the day. I don't want to be alive. I don't want to face the day. That level of depression that is just gripping him. That's what we're talking about. He says, my brain raced uncontrollably. So that's those thoughts that are happening one after another, like racing thoughts. It's like our brain is going at 100 miles an hour. And there's a terrible sense of impending calamity. So he has this sense that something bad is going to happen very soon. That combined with the racing thoughts, he's having a terrible experience with anxiety. That's what that is. He's so anxious. Something bad is going to happen and his thoughts are going. Does that sound familiar? Because I couldn't relate to the courage to do battle was not there. A terrible sense of impending calamity. But when it clicked what he was talking about, I'm like, that was me all day, every day. That is how I showed up to life. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. So he feels like he cannot even cross the street because he's going to have to crawl and probably get run over. An all-night place supplied me with 12 glasses of ale. Now, again, a dozen is 12. 12. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. And that's that right. When your nervous system feels like it's like, you guys know that? Like somebody's stabbing my shoulder blades, like my nerves are going like this. It takes him 12 glasses of ale to settle that down. Can I relate to that? Do I know that feeling? A morning paper had told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so would I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down, and that's that, that weight of that depression, that hopelessness. That's what we're talking about. Gin would fix that, so 2 bottles and oblivion. And so what we're seeing is that alcohol is still giving him at least a little bit of ease and comfort. But what I want to point out is on page 3, what we saw is I had arrived. Bill Wilson, man in charge, I'm the guy. Woo, Bill Wilson. Page 4. He hears about these suicides and his response to suicide disgusts me. I'm not going to jump. I'm going to go back to the bar. Page 6, in this middle paragraph. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Not now. So we're seeing that hopelessness begin to build in him. It goes on to say, the mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony 2 more years. Now the 2 more years are included in that 5 he referenced before. So we're talking 1932, 1933, until he sobered up at the end of 34. That's what we're talking about. And it says, sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Can I relate to that morning terror and madness? Can I relate to stealing from people I would have never stolen from, just so I could get a drink, just so I can get relief? Non-alcoholics don't know what that's like. Non-alcoholics don't ever cross those lines. Non-alcoholics don't know what it is like to feel that way in the mornings. It says again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. Now at this point in time, Bill Wilson is actively suicidal. He's standing before a medicine cabinet where there's poison. So there's sedatives, there are other medication, and he wants to pop them all and overdose and end his life. But he doesn't have the courage to do it. He stands before an open window and he wants to jump. He doesn't want to be here anymore, and he doesn't have the strength to fling himself out the window. I had arrived. Suicide, that disgusts me. Should I kill myself? Not now. To I want to die, but I just can't pull the trigger on it. And we're going to see it go a step further. And we're going to see it go a step further in this paragraph. Look at the progression. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. So he's trying things to get sober. He's trying going out to the country to be in nature, to sober up, or he's swearing off and he comes back and he drinks again, and they're trying these different things and it's not working. Have I tried things to stay sober? Have I tried to put things between me and the first drink, and have that not worked? Then came the night where the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. And what's happening here is Bill Wilson. Now, this is something that, like, if you've experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. It is a level of suicidal where it's almost like the suicidal ideation is taking you. Like, I remember grabbing a hold of my mattress, like just physically holding on because I could not keep myself safe. That is where Bill Wilson is. He is at that place where it's not even I want to die. It's like I don't even think I can keep myself from jumping out of the window and ending it. So he has to drag his mattress to a lower floor because he can't keep himself safe. And when it talks about a window sash, for a long time, I thought, like, I was thinking like a Miss America pageant sash, like Mr. Bill Wilson. That's not what that is. The sash is like the window frame. So he's afraid he's going to burst out of the window and take the whole window frame with him. Unfortunately, he didn't have his Bill Wilson tiara, which, I mean, I think that would have been quite becoming. Anywho. So a doctor came with a heavy sedative. So it's offering him drugs, and those drugs to help control his drinking, those drugs to help detox. Now, I'm going to point something out. Almost every single person here knows what happens next. Now, if we were to go into a room full of non-alcoholics, they are going to be positively befuddled as to what happens next. They are going to be, well, does he take the course of, does the medication help? Did he take the course of medication? Did he, what happened? Tell me more. Well, we know. Next day, found me drinking both gin and sedatives. Woo! Yeah. Those alcoholic enhancers? You go in the medicine cabinet, do not take with alcohol, may cause drowsiness. Woo! That's just going to get me where I need to go a little bit faster. Now, some of us know the other ones, not the downers, the uppers. We take the uppers where we get a little too drunk, so we can't keep drinking, so we take a little bit of an upper, so woo! I can keep going. Yeah. Some of us know what I'm talking about. Woo! Those good old alcoholic enhancers, also known as non-conference approved dry goods. Alrighty. So next day found me drinking both gin and sedatives. This combination soon landed me on the rocks, so he is in trouble and he's trapped and he doesn't have a way out. People feared for my sanity. So did I. And there is some self-awareness going on in Bill. He sees the hopelessness. He knows he can't recover. He sees the reality of his predicament. But self-knowledge is not enough to keep an alcoholic sober. Awareness is not enough to keep an alcoholic sober. People feared for my sanity, so did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. So he is in trouble. Now, just in respect, I don't have time to break down the next paragraph in like 3 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop it there. But what we're going to see is Bill Wilson next week be introduced to the illness of alcoholism, and to learn from Dr. Silkworth what this thing is. And we're going to see that, again, that has no effect. So that is it for me. And at a reasonable time, over to Peppa. Woo!